Good afternoon, everyone. What a really wonderful crowd, and thank you all. There's a lot of places that you could be on a Saturday afternoon, but you chose to be here, and I think that speaks volumes about your heart and your commitment. And Bill, I was just learning the story of what happened to you, and please know that you will have a lot of friends around the country who are going to be willing to stand up for you as well for your courageous stand, so thank you for that. You know, protecting children, especially unborn children, is perhaps the greatest moral challenge and obligation that we have of certainly my generation. And, you know, sometimes I think it's easy for us to think that we're losing the fight and be depressed about it when things happen to Bill like that, when what happened to Komen and Planned Parenthood, when we have 54 million unborn babies who've been killed in the past 40 years, with 1.2 million babies every single year, 6,000 a year right here in Oregon, more than 30 every day. Yet I stand here, despite everything that happened with me, for my husband, when Planned Parenthood came after Komen, I stand here with great optimism about where we are and what we can achieve in the fight for life. And I'm optimistic because across the country, they're not perfect, but we have seen over 10 states enact fetal pain bills. And again, they're not perfect, but when we're up against what we're up against, sometimes you have to be a little incremental and get the achievements that you can. And being able to have that in over 10 states is a huge achievement, including in my home state, Georgia. And then just last week, after a Planned Parenthood worker with the most extraordinarily callous and cavalier comments that could come out of the mouth of an individual who supposedly cares for women, when she talked about what happens to babies born alive in abortion mills in the state of Florida. The Florida legislature unanimously passed the Infants Born Alive Protection Act. Unanimous, folks. Unanimous. And we are finally, and I met Brian. Where are you, Brian? Brian, who helped with the tweet fest over this gruesome Dr. Gosnell and everything that's happened in his abortion. We are finally seeing that get some real traction in the media, because even with the pro-abortion, mostly pro-abortion mainstream media, that is such an atrocity that even they can't turn a blind eye to that. And it's going to be a wake-up call to America, folks. Now, I know that we still have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of challenges, and to be sure, a lot of enemies. And one of the biggest that we face in the fight for life is indeed Planned Parenthood. And so you might have read about a little, I think they kept calling it a kerfluffle between Komen and Planned Parenthood. I personally had some other adjectives and words, nouns to describe it as I was going through it, as did my wonderful husband, Steve. Kerfluffle wasn't really at the top of our list, but it was an extraordinary happening, an extraordinary act of outright mafia-style bullying against an organization that I thought was about one thing, and that was the fight against breast cancer. In fact, a reporter asked me what did I think was my biggest mistake in all of this, and I sort of chuckled a little bit and said, well, I thought it was about breast cancer, not abortion or politics. Silly me. But let's talk about Komen. And, you know, Komen had been providing grants to Planned Parenthood for, I don't know, at least over a decade, certainly long before I went to work for Komen, and I'd only worked there for about a little over a year when all of this came to light. And Komen had really been taking a pretty big backlash. It would flare up and go down about these grants from Planned Parenthood for at least a decade. So this was not a new issue for Komen. What was new for Komen was the increased demands from people who were their donors and certainly from their board about the kinds of grants that Komen was going to be making. What were these grants actually doing to advance the fight against breast cancer? And before I came on board a year, there was a very intensive study done to look at Komen's grants to determine where would Komen invest nearly $100 million a year in community grants. How would those dollars be invested, and how could we, to our donors, make sure that we were getting the highest and best impact from every single dollar that was coming into the Komen organization? And that was ultimately or essentially the foundation of the decision that Komen made when it came to the Planned Parenthood grants, and frankly, other grants that were like them. It just so happened that Planned Parenthood was one of the few organizations that Komen granted to that actually had a network of organizations around the country. Most of Komen's grants, they are made in a community, and that organization that gets the grant, they are in that community and no other community. Planned Parenthood was different in that they were across about 20 communities where Komen was granting to them. So what Komen determined was that continuing poor quality grants in the face of such intense backlash that was clearly alienating a significant percentage of people who wanted to be supportive of Komen, because who doesn't want to see the end to a terrible disease like breast cancer? And we saw this as a very pragmatic business decision. And I know some said, oh, you know, one group of people, Karen's a pro-life hero because she came in and Komen's not going to do those grants. And on the other side, Karen is nothing but a right-wing, zealot, pro-life, crazy person, and she made Komen do that. Truth is, folks, I'm really neither of those. I was just a woman in a breast cancer organization trying to do what was the best right thing in the fight against breast cancer. So Komen made its decision. We knew we could do better with those dollars. We believed that Planned Parenthood understood. And what was probably a very fatal error, the decision was made that Komen's president, Liz, was going to call the president of Planned Parenthood, Cecile Richards. They'd known each other for many, many years, and there was no desire on the part of either organization to fight this out in the media, no desire to make either side the villain. And we thought at Komen, we had what I'll call a gentle ladies agreement, that no one was going to ambush either side in the press. We weren't going to say mean things about each other in the press. Two good organizations was the press statement that was developed by the communications shop. We were just going in a different direction. Planned Parenthood obviously had a different mission in mind. And in the end, this was never for Planned Parenthood about the money, nor was it ever about women. It was about legitimacy and credibility, the kind that an organization with the controversies and troubles and agenda that Planned Parenthood has can get by being affiliated with an organization like Susan G. Komen for the Cure that has had such an impact in the fight against breast cancer. I mean, imagine Komen walking away scot-free. How many other organizations might be encouraged to do the same? But what I do know is this: after seeing what happened to Komen, I promise you there's a lot of organizations out there that they're not even going to start giving to Planned Parenthood. Because why would you? Once you start giving, you can never get out. With absolutely no warning whatsoever, on January 30th, Planned Parenthood, through who I believe was one of their allies, a reporter from Associated Press, unleashed what could only be called one of the most vicious, premeditated, mafia-style attacks on a private organization ever seen. And it was coordinated, and they had lots of allies and collaborators. They included organizations from MoveOn.org, Change.org. It went all the way to some of the highest ranking pro-abortion members of Congress were involved in this shakedown of an organization that simply wanted to end the horrible disease of breast cancer. And it took, and I will tell you, it was, the pressure internally with Komen was intense over those 3 days. When Komen made the announcement, and it unfolded in a way that no one, certainly I or Nancy Brinker or Liz, intended for it to unfold. The decision with the communications group within Komen was that we would simply issue a statement that we had a new strategy. I can't remember what all it said, but a new strategy. We were going to go in a different direction. No harm, no foul. There was nothing negative in it against Planned Parenthood. Inexplicably, Komen's vice president of communications, despite having a specific strategy and directive from the head of the organization to not do interviews, did a more than 1 hour interview with that reporter from AP. I don't know her motivations. I don't know. I just can tell you what happened. And also, ironically, in our offices that day was a Komen PR consultant. Her name was Hillary Rosen of the firm SKD Knickerbocker, which is headed by the former communications director for the Obama White House, a firm that is also a Planned Parenthood PR firm. And yet, Komen, over my objections, hired her because the decision was made above me that Komen needed to have someone to manage the left so that this issue would be handled properly, and it was determined that Hillary would be the right person. I guess she had a different definition of manage than I did. It took only 72 hours for Komen to be literally bullied into capitulation. And I don't use the word bullied lightly because it is what happened. Corporate sponsors were pressured by people from across the country to stop giving to Komen. There were Facebook, the social media onslaught. I can't even begin to tell you how horrible and intense it was. The Twitter world was just crazy with the Komen Planned Parenthood story. And the things that were being said about Komen, about Nancy Brinker, and about me, I mean, there were words that I never even heard before. They were really ugly. But worse than that, there were bomb threats and there were death threats. And so this was against the organization and about individuals personally. And what I learned through all of this was some real truths about Planned Parenthood. And what I hope is that we will have, maybe as a result of this talk, some new message points to share with folks, whether they are with us on the life issue or maybe they're not. But even a person who is on the other side of this issue would really have questions about this organization, giving some of the things that I've been able to get educated on. I said to you that Planned Parenthood, they're not about women. And they've done a masterful job of trying to convince America that they are somehow the lead champions for women across this country. And nothing could be further from the truth. Because they were willing to sacrifice Komen, willing to sacrifice an organization dedicated to women. They promote promiscuity among our teens. They say, and I'm not sure, it's okay. We have children, so I won't say. I don't know if any of you have seen, there's a post, you should check it out, from a fellow out of Hollywood that was put up on Planned Parenthood's teen site, their Facebook teen site, that actually promoted promiscuity to say if it's okay for guys, then it should be okay for women. Now, if this organization was really about women, why aren't they promoting self-respect? Why aren't they promoting graduating from high school? Why aren't they promoting holding yourself in the highest regard? Instead, they're saying, go ahead and be loose. There's nothing wrong with that. That's an outrageous message from an organization purporting itself to be about women. And now they have their Sexy Tuesdays and their latest, this TOPS program, which is literally right in our high schools. And make no mistake about it, folks, that is, I think, one of the ultimate missions for Planned Parenthood, because they know that they are losing this issue, especially with the younger generations. And so for what you were working on, they do want to be in those high schools, and they are making inroads around the country, and we have to be wary about that. They're also not about breast cancer. It was amazing to me to hear how many times the president of Planned Parenthood, Cecile Richards, talked about Planned Parenthood giving mammograms. Well, folks, here's a news flash. They don't do mammograms. And we have to get this out, because Cecile Richards can say it as many times as she wants. President Obama can say it as many times as he wants. It still doesn't make it true. They don't do mammograms. They are at best a pass-through organization, a middle woman, if you will, because mammography clinics must be certified at the federal level, and Planned Parenthood does not currently hold any of those certifications. So they can't even give a mammogram even if they chose to. But here's something else that I found out. And these stats come from the very lips of Planned Parenthood workers and Cecile Richards. 95% of the clients who come to Planned Parenthood, they're under the age of 40. 95%. The average age of a woman coming to Planned Parenthood is 24. Now, ladies, at what age do you get your first screening mammogram? Exactly. So who are the mammograms that they supposedly give even being given to? They don't even have the client base to do it. Now, I would concede that they probably do have some young women who come in who actually are symptomatic, but not to the extent that they are on television and talking about it. In fact, I want to say it's the Wisconsin Planned Parenthood, has a video on its website of a young woman who's probably, I don't know, she looks to be about 30, and she's got a note on her refrigerator saying, don't forget to go to PP today, and off she goes, and then it has her at the Planned Parenthood clinic, and she's getting her breast examined with her exam from the clinician. Then the next frame is a young woman sitting in the Planned Parenthood office with the clinic worker, telling her that she has breast cancer. Well, folks, you can't diagnose breast cancer through a clinical breast exam. Misleading and false to continue this ruse that somehow Planned Parenthood is on the front line of the fight against breast cancer. It's simply not true. Planned Parenthood also very much likes to position itself as the front line of health care for poor women and uninsured women. And again, no surprise, that's not true either. The fact is that our country is fortunate to have a network of over 9,000 federally funded community health centers across this country. They provide poor women and their families, over 20 million people, with primary health care. So in my home state, in Georgia, we have 5 Planned Parenthood clinics. We have over 150 community health centers. Here in Oregon, you have 15 Planned Parenthood centers. You have 140 community health centers, 140. So if a woman really is in need of primary health care, she has a far greater ability to find access for that health care at one of those community health centers than she would at a Planned Parenthood clinic. And if we put up a map and plotted out the locations of the community health centers against the Planned Parenthood clinics, She probably passes any number of community health centers before she would even get to the Planned Parenthood clinic. And on top of that, Planned Parenthood is not equipped to be a primary health care provider yet. And I'll come back to that. Planned Parenthood survives, or maybe I should say thrives, on our tax dollars. The most recent annual report showed that they were getting $542 million of our tax dollars for clinic services. That doesn't sound like very much, but when you net it out, it's $1.5 million each and every day to the largest abortion provider in this country. $1.5 million every single day. That's a lot of money. 45% of Planned Parenthood's total annual revenues come from our tax dollars, folks. 45%. You tell me an organization out there that is allowed to be sustained year after year after year, a private organization with that level of tax dollars, and at the same time is implicated in the kinds of atrocities that we know Planned Parenthood has been implicated in from your Lila Rose talk this morning, and there's probably all sorts of other things. Can you imagine if Oregon Right for Life got half of its budget, half of its revenue from the Oregon state government? Can you imagine? Look, Gail's over there going, yes, yes. But can you imagine the outcry? It's outrageous. It's simply outrageous. And this amount is only set to increase, folks. $75 million in grants under Obamacare have already gone out under the health care reform bill. And even more are going to go out the door to Planned Parenthood at the state level. Planned Parenthood has been systematically going state to state with RFPs to be the designated education and outreach provider, because they say they are on the front line of reaching uninsured women, so they should be the ones leading the education and outreach efforts to reach these women to get them into the health exchanges. Again, the average age of the woman coming to Planned Parenthood is 24. And abortions will be covered in these state health exchanges. Did y'all talk about that in one of your healthcare reform sessions today? Yeah, I was really taken to task about this when I put it in the book, and I talked about it, and I made sure that, well, first of all, did they explain how it's going to happen? Let me just tell you again. So here's how it's going to happen to provide coverage for abortions on demand. So if they're in the health exchanges, there will be various types of insurance that a person could buy. Law will require only one of those plans to not cover abortion, just one. Now that plan may or may not be a rich plan that could really take care of your health care needs if you were to buy one. So now Americans in this overall plan are going to be forced to choose between what is in their best interest from a health standpoint and their conscience. This is sort of a repetitive theme around this issue. And when a person buys a plan, they pay one amount for their premium for the plan, and they pay another amount of at least $1 in a separate transaction to a separate fund for that abortion coverage within that plan. And it is not optional. It is a requirement for that plan. So that is how, it's very, I mean, you have to give it to them. It's a pretty clever way to get around the prohibition on federal funding of abortion. Pretty clever. And also, Planned Parenthood, they do want to be a clinic on every corner. And I firmly believe that just as they were involved in helping to craft that HHS conscious trampling mandate on contraceptions, they also, Cecile Richards was personally at the table in helping to write many of the finer details within the healthcare reform bill. This is an organization that really wants to expand its reach so that they can be part of those exchanges. Planned Parenthood has another motivation, though, beyond just the abortion agenda. They have a raw political agenda. And I did not know this about the organization. Planned Parenthood spent over $10 million in the last election cycle to elect pro-abortion candidates. Over $10 million. And to defeat pro-life candidates. I suspect that if I do decide to run for U.S. Senate in the state of Georgia, I'll get a taste of what they will be dishing out there, but that's all right. I'm tough. Cecile Richards, when she was named president of Planned Parenthood, she said, and this is an exact quote, that her goal was to make Planned Parenthood the most kick-butt political organization this country has ever seen. Now that, I find that curious and insightful, because that's an interesting mission for an organization like Planned Parenthood. And it just goes to, I think, how this is an organization that wants to do more than just push an abortion agenda, because they have to in order to bring more people into their ranks to support the pro-abortion agenda. And here's why I say that. In Minnesota, Planned Parenthood was instrumental in defeating a piece of constitutional amendment to require photo ID for voting. And they were also instrumental in defeating a traditional marriage amendment. Now, when asked why was Planned Parenthood involved in these issues, because they had nothing to do with abortion, they said, because they're our partners and allies, they help us and we help them. Yeah. So, in addition to that, almost every Planned Parenthood across the country has a political action committee. They have these super PACs, these 527s that can take unlimited funding. So if, like me, you believe that federal funding coming into Planned Parenthood subsidizes the abortion agenda, you must also accept that federal funding coming into Planned Parenthood, when they then transferred $10 million every year to their political arm, we are subsidizing with our tax dollars their raw political agenda as well. And it is an outrage. It's an absolute outrage. There are lots of characters in the Planned Bullyhood book, from Debbie Wasserman Schultz to Hillary Rosen to, let's see. Oh, this is one of my other favorites. So one of Komen's other PR folks was a fellow named Brendan Daly with the big PR firm Ogilvy. I found out in the middle of everything when it was blowing up that he used to work for Nancy Pelosi. Nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't want to work for her, but nothing wrong with that. But most importantly, his colleague in Pelosi's office was Cecile Richards. So we had Hillary Rosen with SKD Knickerbocker, a firm that also represented Planned Parenthood, and then we had our other PR advisor who was clearly close friends with Cecile Richards. So maybe it was just meant to be what happened, I don't know, but it was bullying, that's for sure. Just a couple of more points, because I think more than just talking about a book that I wrote and what I learned about Planned Parenthood, it's always important for us to be thinking about where we go from here in the fight for life. And, you know, I think certainly over the last election cycle, we probably learned a whole lot. And one of the things that I think it's important for us to do is make sure that we don't lose sight of what our real goal is. You know, the other side is really good at giving us gotcha questions and trapping us in a corner. Like, for example, the whole issue of contraception and how suddenly it became this, quote, war on women. And I don't understand, how did women's health care get reduced to being about abortion and contraception? I reject that, and we must reject that notion. The pro-life movement, what we're really trying to achieve, and y'all all know this, is we are trying to foster a pro-life culture in which the very idea of an abortion is unthinkable. Right? Yes. That's what we want to achieve. And the truth is, if we're honest with ourselves, if we waved a magic wand and we had all the laws, statutes, and regulations that we could possibly think up and put them in place starting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., the truth is that abortions would still happen and unborn babies would still be killed because laws and regulations on their own don't change a culture. We are in a cultural fight for the soul of America, the soul of this great country. No moral, just society is going to accept the killing of unborn babies for forever, folks. We just are not. And oh, sure, it would be great to claim, victory and cheer and rah, rah, rah. But again, it is about changing that culture. And I'd like to see us work really hard to change the debate, refocus the debate, so that we get this discussion and this debate back on our terms. Not this war on women, not, that somehow it's about contraception versus abortion. The issue is, are we a society in which we are going to tolerate the callous killing of breathing, living human beings? Because a baby doesn't just magically go through the birth canal and pop out with a beating heart. Beating heart was there before, right? So that is, for me, what the real debate is. And if we can refocus that and ask some very pointed questions of the other side. Where is the other side in speaking up and speaking out against the atrocities from Dr. Gosnell? I don't even like to call him a doctor. Has he had his license revoked yet? Really, where is Planned Parenthood on that? I've not seen a single peep from them. As I said, their worker in Florida was A-OK making her testimony about a baby being born alive. And the other side knows they're losing. They know they're losing because there's dropping the whole pro-choice PR positioning. They're dropping it because they understand that the overwhelming majority of Americans don't see an unborn baby as a choice to be killed for mere inconvenience. That is a notion that's rejected. I think with some new messaging, and this is maybe just my little pet peeve, but in the life community, we have a tendency to talk about pregnancy and the age of the baby in weeks. We should talk about it in months, folks. It's hard. When you're talking about 25 weeks, the person's going, oh, what does that mean? I'm trying to calculate it in my head. Folks, 25 weeks is over 6 months. This is 6 months. That is a powerful, powerful visual. And we need to have that on our side because we all have friends. We have friends who are pro-choice. Do they look at a woman who's literally out 6 months and think that abortion is okay? I'm really betting you not. They maybe want to turn a blind eye to it, but in their heart of hearts, they know it's wrong. And we need to have better visuals, a better message, and start talking about the age of these babies in months instead of weeks. It's far more powerful in the mind. Pictures speak far louder than words. And medical technology and medical advances with the vivid images that we get from sonograms today, that is really changing the very face of the fight for life in this country. And we need to turn the tables on the other side with that. Young people, in fact, I'm really proud to see so many young people here. Everybody who's under 30, stand up. Stand up, stand up. Look at this. Look at this. look at this. You young people, they get it. These young people get it. I was giving a speech a couple of months ago, and a young fellow came up to me, and he said, it was a political speech, and we were talking about various social issues, and he came up to me, and he said, I used to be an avid pro-choice person. I said, really, used to be? What changed your mind? He said, well, I got married, and my wife was pregnant with our first child, and I heard that baby girl's heartbeat. And then he said, quote, and I knew I was wrong. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's the messenger, and that's the message. And we need to make sure that the individuals who change their minds, that we invite them in to be our allies in this fight. And this might be a little controversial, but I also think that we need to make sure that we, to the extent that we possibly can, stop fighting each other over the various aspects of the life issue, and remember what the real fight is. It's a fight for life, and it's a fight against evil organizations like Planned Parenthood. That's where we need to be focused. And I will say this, if we can find a place where we have a culture where 98% of abortions become unthinkable, that other 2%, it becomes really unthinkable for that other 2%. I'm going to wrap up and take some questions. During Planned Parenthood's attack on Komen, the pro-abortion side in Planned Parenthood counted on silence from the pro-life side. And for the most part, they did get silence. Yes, the grassroots were very supportive of Komen, but elected leadership were silent. When pro-abortion elected officials were taking to the airwaves, not a single pro-life elected official went on television to defend Komen and the decision. Not one. They counted on us to be too busy fighting amongst ourselves to be ready and strong enough to fight them. Now, I believe that we have the greatest opportunity ever right now before us to really change the face of the culture of this country. I really do believe that. The other side, they've stepped out too far, they've pressed it too far, and it's too extreme. And don't let the polls fool you. Don't let the polls fool you. Because when they say that the majority of Americans are, quote, pro-choice and want legal abortions, they forget to mention the added number of people who want abortions, but with severe restrictions. And if you combine the number of people who want abortions completely made illegal with those who want severe restrictions, we have a huge majority of people that is approaching 60%. And we're going to win this fight because we have right on our side, but we're going to do it with compassion. And the way we do that is to inspire people to want to be bigger and better for themselves and for those who can help themselves and for a generation behind us. I'm what I would call an accidental or maybe reluctant soldier in all of this, because I never in a million years imagined that I would be giving speeches to pro-life organizations. I wanted to be a pro football player when I was growing up, and so this is about as unlikely as being a football player was for me. But yet here I am. And what I can tell you is that Planned Parenthood counted on a whole lot of things that day they unleashed their fury on Komen. But one thing that they didn't count on, they didn't count on me. Thank y'all. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Y'all sit. Thank you. Thank you. ask Gail, do I have time to take questions? Okay. All right. And I'll repeat the questions too for everyone. Yes, sir. Father.
Given what happened between Planned Parenthood and Komen, the public relations person that you chose, or the organization chose, was apparently left-winger in extreme. Somebody at Komen gave more than a 1-hour interview when told explicitly not to do that. Have you ever thought that this was in part an inside job?
He wants to know if I ever thought that it was in part, given everything that happened, an inside job. Every single day, Father. I can't speak for other people's motivations. I just tried to, in the book, lay out the various things that occurred. But I don't think that the lengthy string of coincidences that happened could have really been raw coincidence. There really was a lot of internal turmoil for Komen over this issue. I'll tell you one quick story. So in the summer before all of this happened, Komen has all of their affiliates around the country that runs the races, that coordinate the races for the cure. And so all of these individuals were in a meeting, and we had to have a special, 1 hour and a half session around Planned Parenthood and how to handle the press questions. And I was in the back of the room for this and observing, and it was extraordinarily emotional and tension-filled in the room. And it was clear that the organization was divided in half, and we had one group of people saying, this issue, we just have to stop. These grants aren't that important. It's killing our organization. And another woman stood up after she called some of us crazy Catholics and I don't know what all else. And then another woman stood up and said, exact quote, "A woman's right to choose," she said, "is so important that if Komen must suffer, so be it." Now, this was a turning point for me in all of this. I left that meeting absolutely convinced that Komen had an urgent requirement to disengage from these grants because of we were off mission. We were focused on something that was not breast cancer. And in retrospect, and hindsight's always gives you such clarity, I look at that, and what I really should have taken from that is that this was an organization so divided on the issue that uncoupling from those grants was going to be extraordinarily difficult. And it was sort of the first sort of harbinger, and I missed it, that I was going to be the person walking that plank. But that's fine. It's just what happens. Yes?
Forgive my ignorance.
That's okay.
What are the origins of Planned Parenthood, and why are they so married to this love of abortion? I mean, I don't know how they started and why they are so attached to that whole concept at the risk of all else.
The question is about the origins of Planned Parenthood and why are they so attached to the issue of abortion. They started out in the contraception area and then morphed from there. And I think it became raw dollars. When Roe v. Wade was passed, think about it. It was a huge money-making opportunity for the organization, and it remains today. They will tell you that only 3% of their revenues come from abortion, and it's just nonsense. And here's how they're able to do that. First of all, we know that the number of abortions at Planned Parenthood have been going up as a percentage of the total in the country, right? Yet somehow it's a steady 3% for them. Yet their non-abortion services have declined while their government funding has gone up, yet 3%. I might not be, a genius, but that strikes me as slightly statistically impossible. Yes, sir.
Karen, what do you suggest now for all of us in interfacing with Komen?
It's important to remember that Planned Parenthood's the villain in all of this. I hope that people will give Komen some credit for two things. One, what they've accomplished to date in the fight against breast cancer, which is really, and with the help of other organizations, but Komen really has been on the front line of this, and it's truly remarkable that the 5-year survival rate for breast cancer in just 30 years has gone from 74% to 98%. And that's nothing short of miraculous, and we should not take that away from Komen's accomplishments. What I would suggest is you need to make your own decision about the organization, or if you would look for something locally, almost all of the churches, all of the hospitals have programs for low-income women to receive free or discounted mammograms. If breast cancer research is what you really are interested in, give directly to a research project. That happens all the time. I have a friend in Atlanta, there's a big research project at the WinShape Emory Cancer Center, and he gives directly to that because he just wants to do it directly to the project. So those are two options. Yes, and then I'll come over here. Yes.
You made a comment about Planned Parenthood and how they've been involved so politically. Like they did this mandate. Do you think their plan ultimately is to be in control of the health system, Obama's health care?
The question is, given my comment about Planned Parenthood and their role in the HHS mandate and healthcare reform, if their plan is to control healthcare in the country, I think that what they are trying to do is to expand their footprint to make it as big as it possibly can, and they understand that on the abortion debate, they're losing. They know they're losing. The generations that are coming up, the young people under 30, they are dramatically more pro-life than people over 55. That's just a statistic. And so I think they know that they're losing ground. They want to be in the general healthcare field. Think about it. If they are, it gives them far greater access to people. And then secondly, what they're doing to be in high schools and to really infiltrate into the teenagers. I'm going to go over here and then I'll come back. Yes?
If Komen's mission is to fight breast cancer and research shows that abortion increases breast cancer, why would you give grants to Planned Parenthood for abortion?
Exactly. Okay. You know, I'm not the scientist. I did when I was at Komen, given all of, I've read everything I can get my hands on about the link and everything I can tell. Again, I'm not the scientist. There's a difference between risk. I'm sure there's some docs in the room.
What was the question?
I'm sorry. Wow. The question was about breast cancer and the link with abortion.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Now I'm scared. There's a big difference between causality and risk factor, and everything that I've been able to read is there's still some questions in there. And given that, what I had suggested to Komen was they should do a study about it, but that was not moved on, unfortunately. Yes, this has to be my last question, and I'll be out front, so I'll be happy to answer some more. Yes, sir.
Yes. Why is Planned Parenthood only in our inner city schools, and also why is their main building also in the heart of the inner city only?
The question is, Planned Parenthood, why are their clinics, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, their clinics are located in the inner cities? There's been any number of studies about, trying to be within low-income populations, and I think that that's just it. They want to be in the low-income areas because that's a better market, if you will, for their abortion services. And again, back on, they will say it's because for contraception, these federally funded healthcare centers, folks, poor women can get reduced fee contraceptions there, and the last time I checked, There's not a problem in this country getting your hands on contraception. You have been wonderful, and I want to just say lastly, thank you for your support of Oregon Right to Life and of the crisis pregnancy centers within the entire state. What you do and what Oregon Right to Life, and particularly these crisis and pregnancy centers for women, they are the front line folks. They need your help. They need your support, whether it is your voice, your feet. When they ask you to send an email out to your friends and your legislators, please do it. If you can support them financially, do that too. Thank you. God bless you.